Hi, I'm Artash. I'm going to be talking about artificial intelligence, biases, and the role of curiosity in fixing them. It all started in grade 7 when I came home with an 86% in math. My dad gave me a high five and promised me a new game, but my mom told me I was playing too many games, so this left me confused. Was 86% a good or a bad grade in math? And I realized this was because both my parents had different opinions. Humans have preferences and this changes their decisions. We view the same thing in a different way. I was curious, if we were to completely remove humans from decision making, what would happen? Because if we relied on a computer to make these decisions, human preferences would not matter anymore and decisions would be standardized. Would this remove the biases from decision making? Well, turning to an algorithm is exactly what they did in UK when they used an AI algorithm to predict students' final grades. But this caused a widespread student protest because students realized that the algorithm discriminated against poorer students. So they decided to turn back to teachers to make these decisions. But we've removed human factors from this decision. So how come these biases are still happening? Well, this is in fact because algorithms are made by humans, and they rely on massive data sets to make their decisions. These data sets come from our society. Society is made up of humans. Therefore, our human preferences and biases are reintroduced. Where do these human biases come from? Well, on some things, all of us agree. Like we know what animal is a cat and which one is a dog. But on some things, we don't agree. Like my parents disagreeing whether 86% was a good or a bad grade in math. And often there's a whole host of new complexities. Like if we were to ask people whether pizza is a food or not, most kids would say it is, but most parents would say it isn't. Artificial intelligence decision making has 3 steps. The first one is the data, which I just talked about. Second, there's the algorithm that's being used. And finally, there's the human validation of the AI's decisions. And biases can occur at each one of these steps. Let me show you. First, the data bias. AI algorithms are trained on massive amounts of data and have to find patterns inside this data to make their decisions. So if it was shown data of basketball players, it would find that most of them are very tall. If it were to look at directors of Canadian companies, it would find that most of them are white. AIs take these patterns and blindly replicate them into their decisions. For example, an AI trained on these data sets would say that short people cannot become basketball players, or racialized people are unlikely to become directors of Canadian companies. Second, there's the algorithmic bias. I've worked on AI algorithms for many years, and some of the major types of algorithms are convolutional neural networks that work on imagery data, recurrent neural networks that work on time series and historic data, and finally, reinforcement learnings that work over time and learn based on human feedback. There are biases in each one of these algorithms. Convolutional neural networks work on features and learn to identify them in an image. But if a person comes along who has different features from the ones it has already seen, then it won't be able to make an accurate decision. Recurrent neural networks work on past and historic data. So if there's a data point in the past where you were in an unfavorable situation, it would still take that into account when making a decision. Finally, reinforcement learnings algorithms know if they're doing good based on what a human tells them, reintroducing the human bias into it. Finally, there's the validation bias. Because these decisions by AIs aren't blindly accepted. Like if someone was using an AI to determine whether someone would be a favorable job candidate, even if the AI tells them that they would, they could still inject their own preference into it and reject the candidate just because they don't like them or the way they look. In addition, humans also have the responsibility of determining if an AI should be used to solve a problem. Like it's okay to use an algorithm to determine a music that someone may like based on their past music history. But it's not okay to use that same past music history to determine whether someone is likely to commit a crime. These decisions made by AIs can have a huge impact on people's life. It can determine the difference between a student's pass or fail in a course. It can make the difference between getting accepted at a job or rejected at a job. It can make the difference between getting a bail or going to jail. That's why we need to tackle these biases. And this is where curiosity comes in. If AI algorithms, instead of blindly accepting the patterns it sees, were to question them, like if an AI looking at data of basketball players were to question, why are basketball players so tall? and even questions that are much harder to answer, like why have only able-bodied candidates been accepted for this job, or why has there never been a woman as Prime Minister of Canada? And this curiosity-based approach is what I incorporated into my robot Artemis. Artemis learns by asking these questions, and I also realized that bias is greatly reduced when you look at a multimodal approach. Instead of just looking at an image or just looking at a text, looking at multiple of them at the same time. And humans operate the exact same way. When I go outside, I'm not only able to tell I'm outside because I see I'm outside or I see cars outside, I'm also able to hear unfamiliar sounds of cars rushing by and people are talking. Or if I'm at school, I hear both unfamiliar as well as familiar noises and see several people around me. Artemis does the same. And I've also incorporated the human rights and ethics into Artemis so that it will never make a decision that violates human rights. Here's a short video of Artemis at work.
I see food on the dining table. The food is hot. It is 3 p.m. It must be time for lunch. Bon appetit.
Artemis, bravo. Thank you for reminding me. There are three main takeaways from my presentation. The first is that biases in our society will be reflected in algorithms. Second, we must disclose where an AI is being used so that people that feel that they've been discriminated against knows there's an AI behind it and have a recourse. Finally, we must keep expanding our data and question it so that we can have unbiased data to create unbiased algorithms. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed my talk.